It is top of the week and top of the morning, and guess who else is on top? Nsingizini Hotspurs. That conversation happening this morning later on the program. Really great topics to uncover this morning and really delve into when we look at our sports, our local football. We'll also look at other news, but locally, Nsingizini Hotspurs, the Shisarene region, is back at the top. There was a lot of talk when they got beaten by Mbabane Highlanders, but well, Derek Shiba did issue out a statement and he said they will come back at the top, and indeed it has happened. Good morning, welcome to the show. It's a beautiful Monday morning. My name is Tifisong Mane and I'm with Lungalele Makakwa.
Indeed, it's a beautiful morning, Nguni.
Absolutely.
Temperatures especially Lapha in Mbabane, the highest temperature we're going to reach today is 24 degrees Celsius. It's a very good morning and welcome to the program. So you had a lovely and blessed weekend. It's a Monday, new week, new day, new blessings, new opportunities. It's the 19th of May 2025. My name is Lungalele Makakula. On the program on Friday, last week Friday, the Minister of Labour and Social Security officially launched the 2023 Labour Force Survey. They reveal the unemployment rate in Eswatini is at 35%. It is an increase from the 2021 survey. We'll be joined by the statistician from the Central Statistical Office, Kona Etigo Melusi Similand. Itin kahle Labour Force Survey iphethe ini bangakhi labasebenza kubantu lapha eveni bangakhi labangasebenzi sidaba sinayo 6:30 lomhla ekseni.
Yeah, that is going to be the conversation this morning for Lulu, and we will have, Patizom CV come on to the show. Linda Mastadlamina, I beg your pardon, is our sports journalist and sports analyst. We want to talk all things sports. We've already highlighted Nsingizini is back at the top of the log standings. How have they done that? Are they able to win their next game? How are they faring? Looking at the last remaining game of the season, the fixtures are out. We'll look at them as well as the Red Leopard because they are still on the chase. Do they have a chance? Who are they playing? All of that 7:30 this morning. Good morning. Let's look at the leading news headlines this morning. Mapepanza Bailive.
All right, so looking at the Times of Eswatini, leading stories this Monday. Divine Justice will reveal truth behind two kids' death. And this is according to pastors. All right, Nasibuga e-Observer this morning, Kansila Tehamba Mbili shock as a mom poisons her 7-year-old son. Police confirm arrest as woman is alleged to have forced child to ingest poisonous substance. Psychologist calls for child protection measures to grow amid distress in case. In other news, companies share their plans. Kanti Gulatini Tambambili Shembe leader arrives today. Health crisis, past motions haunt Minister Matebula.
Eswatini Observer Sports, your top stories. Guard of Honor, 180,000 Malangeni for Malandi. While Amawele's fairy tale promotion has happened in what has been called a miracle, Msunduza, where Amawele FC promoted to Premier League in debut NFD season and dominant 4-1 win on the final day confirms their place. On another story, female fans busted in ticket scandal at Mavuso. We also do have the results from the weekend as well as the log standings.
As for Eswatini Daily News, leading stories, some agents are running shops illegally. Fine hiked to 15,000 Malangeni. In other news, the Deputy Prime Minister carries His Majesty's vision to Brazil-Africa dialogue on food security. And on another one, government investigates allegations of forged scholarship documents.
Here are your top stories. Kutemidlalo, Eswatini Daily News. Nzabalamba Mbili, Birds fans want MC beyond 2000 Zwane out. A section of the Mbabane Swallows supporters carrying placards have voiced out their displeasure with long-serving official Sandile beyond 2000 Zwane and the management committee as capital city giants limp from one defeat to the next. On another one, Eswatini in Singizini's 2 million emalangeni path, while Arsenal secure second place with win over Newcastle.
It's 5 minutes after 6. We go for an ad break. Nasibuya sithatha indaba Eswatini.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.za.
Sihlehla sichubeka nehlelo lomhla ekuseni Kusile breakfast show sitawuthokotela nathi tindzaba tesiswati. Inkosikazi Makela Fokiane seyiguqule impilo yagogo Ntfombi Sibili Dlamini wasenzaweni yaseSigcaweni ngaphansi kwenkhundla yasembolonjeni. Inkosikazi ikhiphe gogo Dlamini endlini lebeyibeka impilo yakhe ebungotini yamakhela indlu lensha. Kubeke nekujabula lokukhulu ngesikhathi gogo Dlamini sekafakwa endlini yakhe lensha leyakhiwe ngiyo inkosikazi.
David weBhayibhelini uthi lo mdzala wemalanga uyayinaka imikhuleko yalabangenabani angayibukeli phansi imithandazo yabo. Lena ngiyona ndlu lebekahlala kiyo gogo Ntfombi Sibili Dlamini lebeyibeka impilo yakhe engcupheni. Etinyangeni letendlulile inkosikazi Makela Fokiane yatsinzeka ngesimo sakhe. Yakhipha ke libandla lelamvakashela lamesula tinyembeti ngetindzaba letinhle tekwakhiwa kwendlu yakhe lensha. Kubuka simo sendlu lebekahlala kiyo gogo Dlamini ungene ingakapheli yathi ngcono indlu yakhe lensha. Lokusimanga-ke kuthi kuthite ngemva kwelilanga linye yaphumile kule ndlu lenzala yabe yidzilika. Lokusho ukuthi kube imkhiphanga inkosikazi kwenteka ukuthi ngabe kutekwa letinye lomhla. Inkosikazi iphanze kuhle ukuthi athi angena gogo endlini yakhe lensha abese kanembhedze lomusha kudla naletinye nje tinshwana lefake ekhathi tinsipho nemakhandlela. Lwetfulele endlu egameni lenkosikazi Makela Fokiane kube ngimake nomtsikelelo Shabangu.
Namuhla uNkulunkulu wende lokho akusiye wangihosi lowendile uNkulunkulu atsinza inhlitiyo yakhe uNkulunkulu amhlupha busuku bonke uNkulunkulu akhulumisana nempilo yakhe wasuyawenda lo msebenzi wakhe waNkulunkulu akusiye wamake bathandekayo uShito wathi sibosho njalo kwekuthi abethunywe uNkulunkulu abengikadithumi yena siyambonga kakhulu uNkulunkulu nasibona umsebenzi lomhle kangaka
gogo Dlamini wendlulise emavi ekutibongela enkosikatini.
Ngiyabonga mntwanami. Ngibonga letibusiso longendele tona. Ungazina nangemuso. Noma ngafa mntwanami ubujuju ngiqhubeke kanjalo. Mntwanami. Ngimi ngikhona ngilole kule ndlu lena mntwanami.
Indvuna imcuba iphakamise sibongo emakhosini egameni lendlunkulu.
Ayethe wena waphakathi welingane sintaba samabhoko. Siyabonga kakhulu kwenyama khipha libandla lakho litosita la netishosha netimpumbutse lamuhla siyabonga kakhulu lesendele kona kuyabonakala ukuthi netinsanzane utatekhweda.
Bucopho basesigcaweni Meshak Gametsa buthi isono liyabonakala ligalelo lemgomo wankwe.
Sithi kasithathe lethuba sibonge kakhulu emakhosini ngekugijima kangaka ngilo nkweke la khuma ngayo ingwenyama isibayeni ukuthi kusukelanyana kutaba nankwe simbona ke kanjalo kuhle kakhulu siyakubona siyadumisa kakhulu lokwendeke lamhla kulogogo ngoba gogo bekalala ebaleni ngabona labaningi babona
Kwakhiwa kwendlu yagogo Dlamini kuqinisa tinhlelo temakhosi teqinisekisa ukuthi kubabethe gogo noba mkhulu lolala ebaleni ngenxa yokweswela indlu. Emavikini ledlulile ingonyama ibemetele uhlelo lwavelonke lokwakhiwa kwetindlu tabo bogogo nabomkhulu. Lobika kwethu Indzabeni ngisandile Makhanya naThabiso Dlamini esigcaweni East.
Umhlonishwa Ndvunankhulu Russell Dlamini ube ingcenye yebaholi bemave emhlaba labangenele umcimbi wekufungiswa kwemholi lomusha welibandla lemakatolika emhlabeni Pope Leo we-14. Lo mcimbi ubanjelwe eVatican City eveni le-Italy.
Tinkulungwane temakholwa elibandla lemakatolika emhlabeni tingenele umcimbi wekufungiswa kwemholi lomusha walelibandla Robert Francis Prevost losatiwa ngokuthi nguPope Leo we-14 losathe tinsambo kuPope Francis losangasekho emhlabeni. Umhlonishwa Ndvunankhulu Russell Dlamini bekatsamelele ingwenyama kulo mcimbi kanti ke ulitholele lithuba lekuhadalisela yena Pope Leo we-14 egameni lemakhosi. Pope Leo ekutalelwa edolobheni leChicago eveni leMelika uneminyaka lengama-64 wethembise abalandzeli baleli bandla ukuthi utawubasebenti sabo nekuthi utawuhamba ngetimiso taleli bandla lekulithandwo nebunye. Pope Leo uthi libandla lemakatolika linensayeya yokuletha kuthula emhlabeni uthi kungumsebenzi wabo babaholi bemakatolika ukuthi balihlanganise leli bandla libe munye. Ucele libandla lemakatolika eveni leMelika nakuletinye tindzawo lapho kungaviwana khona ukuthi babuye phansi bahlale phansi bavane babe nekuthula. Kufunga kwaPope Leo kuphawula kucala luhambo lwakhe lwebupapa ngalokusemthethweni. Lo mcimbi ungenelwe nabaholi abafaka ekhatsi Volodymyr Zelensky welive le-Ukraine kanye nelisekela lamengameli welive leMelika JB Vance kulabanye. Umbiko uhlanganiswe nguLington Gule ngiseVatican eRome.
Indvuna yelitiko letinkhundla umhlonishwa Sikhumbuzo Dlamini uthi intfutfuko leKhonsile yemimango ibita kubambisana kwahulumende boba betikhulu nebantfu benkhosi lababuka imimango kanye nesive. Indvuna beyikhuluma ngesikhatsi lelitiko letfula tinhlelo tentfutfuko enkhundleni yasenkilongo emphakatsi waselungutfu ngemgcibelo.
Itiko letinkhundla nekutfutfukiswa kwato ngemgcibelo oluvakashele inkundla yasenkilongo emphakatsi waselungutfu kuyotfula tinhlelo tentfutfuko. Lendzawo yaselungutfu ke ibhekene netinkinga letahlukene kufaka ekhatsi kokubada esikolwa, libloho umgwaco nemtfolamphilo kanti nesive salomphakatsi site kahle lwati ngetikhwama tahulumende tekutfutfukisa eMaswati. Indvuna lelitiko komhlonishwa Sikhumbuzo Dlamini uthi lemisebenti itawuphumelela ngekubambisana kwesive salendzawo naye uhulumende.
Tina ngabe la elungutfu kunenkinga yemgwaco, ilibloho, kunenkinga yesikolo, kunenkinga yekliniki, kunenkinga yetemidlalo, kunenkinga yemabhizinisi. Nabe akhanuka hulumende, bakhanuka labantfu. Ngoba hulumende angafuna kunika, but maningafuni kwemukela, definitely ngeke kwendeke lutho. But nangabe sonke si-committed ukuthi kwendeke, liciniso lithi lelivele lisingalishintsha ngeminyaka munye libe ku-first world status. Lamuhla nje sikhuluma ukuthi la lunkuntfu sitabe sila ngaFebruary March sitobuka lemisende seyendekile itabe iphelile and futhi yonke itabe iphele ngesikhathi esincane.
Sikhulu semphakathi waselunkuntfu Impunga Mvimbi Mathe sithi umsebenzi wendlunkulu uqinisekisa inhlalakahle yesive.
Ngibonga kakhulu nje kufika kwakho kanye nohulumende wonke naloko ukuthi ke inhloso yethu futhi lenye yokuthi angeke bamhlonishwa uma usikhulu ungabi nebudlelwane nemalunga eParliament. Lokuba nebudlelwane nebungani nabo kusho ukuthi ndawukhona kubambisana entuthukweni. ukhutsata zena leminye imango.
Umcondzisi weliphiko lwaka-Micro Projects Sibusiso Mbingo uchaza le misebenzi etawusukumiswa kulolu phiko kule ndzawo yaseLunkundvu.
Baka-Micro Project Paseltura Economic Planning and Development sibambisene netiko letinkundla sithunywe kumsebenzi lomkhulu la lofaka ekhatsi ukukhulisa lesikolo ngoba kwanye lesikolo sisagcina grade 1 grade 2 kusho ukuthi lokutawulandzela ngekutfola timali kuye uhulumende kutaba ukuthi kwakhiwe lesikolo lokune kutawulandzela ke kuvakele ukuthi kutaba khona eclinic lesicabanga ukuthi baka health basitawusinika i-guideline ukuthi sitawusebenza njani nabo kwakha le-clinic lokunye-ke kuvakele ukuthi vele ibhasi iyadzingeka ukuthi ikhone ukuthi ichumanise le ndzawo yaseLunkundvu nayo i-big band ngoba bahamba amadima nabakothenga kamathatha.
Le misebenzi-ke ihambisana nemigomo wentuthuko wakhe uhulumende lothi uhulumende kumele acinisekise inhlalakahle yalo lonke eLeswati sukela phansi emimangweni. Lubikako nguSamkasiwe Khoza nabheki Mazibuko eLunkundvu.
Komishana wemnyango wekucondzisa timilo lamakhosini Dlamini uthi live laseswatini ngekubanjiswa tinhlangothi letahlukene litawucinisa kusebenziswa kwetebuchwepheshe kuchuba kusebenta kwemnyango wekucondzisa timilo. Dlamini abekhuluma ngesikhathi yachaza ngemhlangano wetinhlangothi temave livekati le-Afrika ticondzisa timilo lobanjelwe eveni le-Morocco lapho live leswatini libe selikhetfwa ebandleni lalenhlangano e-African Correctional Services Association.
Nathi singemaswati sikhonile kuhamba sobukhulumisa itopic besiniketwe nasesisingayikhulumisa lekhuluma nge-utilization of technology tools in management of women and juvenile offenders. Sibekisa ngalo live lemaswati ukuthi yini lesikusebenzisa ukuthi nebuka bomake nema-juveniles. Angisho ukuthi uhambe kahle lo mhlangano ibe khona interest learning labayitshengisako labe balalele. Angisho ukuthi baningi basite batakuta batofunza. Nathi sesihleli khona la sibe nako lokufunza lokuyilo okukhulu. Angisho ukuthi ngesikhathi se-COVID yebo sasivalele amathuba lamaningi kepha yavula ukuthi ngabe singentanti into etinye lesingadenta angibekise nje savala nathi kwaba khona awu laba la ngekhasi bayidzinga imali sasabafaka i-mobile money manje tivashta ngabe khona nyalo-ke emavela amanye from laso sikhathi leso asenta kwekuthi noma ungabe usemakhaya lapho kukhonakala khona ukuthi ukhona ukuthi ube nayo i-laptop noma i-TV lapho sixhumanisa khona nelelijele bakhona ukuthi bangasasukule emakhaya bede ejele bachubeke bakhulumisa labale ngaphandle lokho nasi sikubonisa kungasebentela ngoba nabo laba bekunele sinativasti ngoyimali esinato nato tiyadzinga ukuthi tibone tihlobo tato ngoba lesikubone kukuhle kakhulu kuloko kokuthi thina nje sinenhlanhla eSwatini sinetinkundla singasebenzisana netinkundla sathi ukuthi baye enkundleni yachumana nalo jela afuna abone khona lolo lwengekhathi baxoxe lapho kuta gogo kuta mkhulu kuta ngazi usinetinkundla khona dingaba khona kepha nje-ke angisho uqiniso ukuthi kuba kuhle kakhulu lokho ngoba bangabonela abaningi ekhaya adive umuntu usekhaya vele already akekho angadiva kusule ngekhathi.
Inhlangano yaka-Esakro lesita kunakelela similo salabaphule umthetho ekhathatekile ngelizinga labatibulala ngalo bafundzi benyuvesi yakuleli. Lenhlangano ifundzise bafundzi benyuvesi yeSwatini ekwaluseni ngemiphumela lomubi wekutibulala kanye nebumcoka bekuphila engqondweni.
Inhlangano i-Esakro lefundzisa ngekugwema bucala nekunaka lesebahambe ngesancele semtsetfo nempilo ibakhutsate babuyise emgceni ihlanganisa abafundzi benyuvesi yaseSwatini ekwaluseni kubafundzisa kabanti ngekugwema bucala netidzakamizwa. Mayibonge Methula wayo-ke lenhlangano uthi bafundzi benyuvesi bangenela lokunengi kungako-ke kumcoka ukuthi sebake babakhulumise.
Sikhona for bona sikhona for everyone sikhathatekile nge-community ukuthi ayikhule kube bamfu labangcono babe ma-leaders langcono la kusasa nema-decisions labawenda kube ngiwo la informed stokwakha live liyembili ngemfumbo.
Bafundzi bayo-ke enyuvesi lebenta tifundo tabo sonhlalakahle bathi lokuyinkinga lenkulu kutibulala kwebafundzi.
Nasiphuma siyosita abantu kumele kucale sitinake thine njengoba nathi sibantu sathi ukuthi kahle kahle letinkinga letibhekene nebantu labaningi kumele siti-understande kucala si-understande ukuthi so that nasi-understanda thina singakhona ku-understanda labanye abantu sikhona nekubasita futhi.
Sibe nama-issues la ekhathi bo-suicide among students so kuyinkinga lehluphako leyo ikakhulu la kubantwana labase-university so nathi sima sonhla kahle bemabantu besikole sokuthi ngeke kube nendlela maybe intervene ngayo ukuze sinciphise leto inkinga leti khona.
It has helped us a lot from the speakers it has helped us a lot. Sekhona nathi lesikwatiko from what they're teaching us. We are learning ukuthi, as a social worker, before you start going out there to help other people, start by helping out yourself. Then lapho, as you are okay, you are able to bring out an okay society.
Kulo mhlangano ke betikhona netinhlangano ezahlukahlukene nato kutofundzisa kushiyelwa neligwayi nabo ke bafundzi kanti ke bafundzi labenta sona ke sifundo sabo sonhlala kahle bathi basafunza ngayo i-social work batogcinisakisa ukuthi bayatama ukuthi sebenta tindzaba tebafundzi basenta tifundo tabo. Lobika kungugiyane Msebi ngisekwaluseni.
Siyakhala lesinye sive sendzawo yasesibebe sithi kunendvodza yakulendzawo lebahluphako ibesabisa ngekwekuthi itawubabulala njengoba ke isola lesive ngekuthi siyeba. Lesive sithi nasiyibika lendzaba emaphoyisa akayibophi lendvodza.
Indzaba mlonyeni lendzaba yalendvodza lesola ngehlukubeta sive lapha kulendzawo yasesibebe lesinye sive sithi sesasaba nekuyeta itolo ngoba lendvodza iyayijangaza ngacelembe emgwacweni nakwentiwa lendzaba sive sicele kungavetwa buso njengalokhu sithi sesaba ukuthi lendvodza kungenteka bese iyasihlasela.
Waqala kungatheka ngisengavusela nemvusela. Nakashaya ke ngempama yesibili ngizame ukumfuqa azame kushaya ngalobhusha. Lobhusha bengizame ukuthi ngiblokele isandla suke vele sibambane vele ke lapho sale vele kubanjwa nambamba vele sishumbetelane ke vele giqo ngize ngikhone kuwina lobhusha.
Mina nje wangisikutanga bhusha wambeka lansamini mina mfana siswami lapha estation ngasita ukuthi chamuke bhuti wami abese usukela yena ushaya yena uthi bambalandzaweni bayaganga ufuna kubabulala bonke one by one. Sahamba sawuvula emacala emaphoyiseni elila simande kuda nje sawabashaye sagcina ngekuvula emacala kuphela.
Wafika lapha kimi wabulala yonke into nje yonke into lengiphila ngayo manje nje akunalutho. Yonke ifurniture yahle endlini tinto tasendlini ngisebenzisako tincingo ngisebenzisako ngiko nje lengikhala ngayo kakhulu ukuthi vele wangibulala lo mfana ngoba manje angathi nje ukuthi ngiphila njani.
Njengalokhu lesive senta tinsolo tekuthi sizathu lesikhulu ingaboshwa lendvodza kubangelwa ukuthi italwa ngumake lowatiwako kutepolitiki lisika lemchumaniso maphoyisa nesive assistant superintendent loSipho Mnguni lithi lesive asicebele amaphoyisa lahluleka kubopha lendvodza njengalokhu umthetho ude mehlo.
Laba nje siyacela ukuthi asebabuyele embabane emaphoyiseni bavele kumphathi siteshi umthetho kude la ungefiki khona. Kungakho nje ngithi angikafisi kuva ukuthi kuliciniso ukuthi lokhu ngabe kuyendeka kude umuntu longaphuma ayoganga bese sekuthiwa yena ngoba kumbe utalwa ngibani umthetho ngeke usafika kuye. Kungakho nje sicela kakhulu ukuthi abaphuthume basukume bayile ngoba bantfuna beta batowupota bafike bathi sitowupota nangifortune asibi-ke thina emaphoyisa sibe solosibuka ukuthi engabe fortune usuka kuliphi ikhaya utalwa ngibani thina sithatha fortune ngoba sekuthiwa nguye lo gangile sisebende ngaye siphenye ukuthi size sifike lapho bantu labo labangibona bangajabule bagculukile ukuthi sekusebentekile.
Imetamu yokufaka lendvodza ikaba impumelelo tindzatse litalo msakalo titsena tifike ekhaya lakhe athi kakhanzi muntu akatsindwa lo make walendvodza acela ukuthi achumanise letinsatheli nalendvodzana yakhe uthi lendvodzana yakhe ide lucingo lo make longumkantshi ubovu kutete politiki ubese ululeka letinsatheli talo msakado ukuthi indlela lengiyo yokusebenta lendzaba ukuthi itishayele emaphoyisa hayi lendvodzana yakhe lobikako ngumfortune dlangamandla nakuyane Msebi sesibebe.
Isikolo lesiphakeme saseqinisweni isikolo lesakhiwa ukuthi semukele wonke umntwana kungaba ngilophilile emtimbeni noma ke lokhubatekile. Thishela nhloko walesikolo Azanele Xaba uthi bafundzi labakhubatekile sebakhona ukukhululeka bafunze njengalabanye.
Lesikolo saseqinisweni sicale kusebenta ngeminyaka wa-2021 ngekusekelwa nguhulumende welive leJapan ngenhloso ekuletha imfundo lelungela lonke lihlobo lwemntfwana. Emabala lesikolo akhiwa abalungela abafundzi labahamba ngema-wheelchair kanye nalabangaboni emehlweni nasemaklasini kuba khona kwekusekela labangaboni emehlweni ukuthi bakhone kubhala kanjalo nalabangeva etindlebeni ukuthi bakhone kukuva lokufundziswako. Thishelelo omkhulu lesikolo Zanele Xaba uthi kulomnyaka bongu-178 bafundzi kanti labangu-18 ngilabakhubateke ngetindlela letahlukene.
Laba la sikolweni le environment seyibakhe kangoba sebemukelene seyifamily le need bakhona kusebenzisana nabo teacher staff ne support staff iyadi ukuthi isikolo lesikanjani ude kuxwasana ba safe ba happy sekusala nje ke nase baphumela ngaphandle ngoba socially kula kuma communities vele indzaba yebantwana labaphila nekukhubateka noma netidzingo letehlukile kunatala abanye isengakafundziseki kahle isengakapromoteki kahle ulapho ke labe bese khona ukhanza ukuthi sebatfola leyo discrimination sebatfola kumbe leyo bullying impela lendzaba yale inclusive ipromoteke la kuma community levels icubuke ito cover yonke lendzawo so that noma lo mntwana saphuma kulama boundaries angibekisa aqiniswe na high school abe free angaxwaswa ngumuntu ngebunguye bakhe futhi angancabelwa ngumuntu ku access atintfo letinengi tekufundza naye njengeliswati lelifuneka ukuthi libe limlibalo yempilo lo wakha livela kangwane.
Thishelelo buke bafundzi labakhubatekile kulesikolo acitsile Dludlu uthi abatali bahlangabetana nebulukhuni kuthengela abantwana labakhubatekile amathuluzi ekufundza ngekuthi ayabadulele.
Siyadzinga kakhulu kubanjiswa ikakhulu kuhulumende kubothishela lesinabo akusibo bonke labathole lokucecesheka ngekwati ukuthi ku-inclusive education yini lele yentekako bayafika nje futhi labanye bahambe ukhanze ukuthi seyiyasala leyo gap time and again kufika lomusha lomunye bekasakhonile kufunza lomunye bekasakhonile kubona ukuthi labantwana banakekelwa kanjani so kakhulu sidzinga lokuthi ngaso sonke isikhathi abe khona lama trainings lapho batawucecesheka khona labo thishela.
Lakangwane litibophelele ukuthi wonke umfundzi alitfole lithuba lemfundo lesezingeni lelisetulu kumanje tinge-24 tikola licuba lehlelo lwemfundo lemukela wonke umntfwana pheceleti inclusive education lapha eVenin. Lobika ngithando kuhle Mdluli cinisweni.
Kulandzela kwanza kwetehlakalo tekutfolakala kwebantfu babulewe balahlwa emahlatsini lakhelene nendzawo yasenzingeni takhamuti ngekubambisana nemabandla kulendzawo tihlangene ngemgcibelo emthandazweni kunxusa kusimakathe kutsi letigilamkhuba letingcolisa umango wato titfolakale. Ikhuluma kule nkonzo indvuna yemcuba enzingeni Mphikeleli Mkhonda ivetile kutsi letehlakalo setingetulu kwemandla abo.
Mphikeleli Mkhonda indvuna yemcuba enzingeni utsi kuyatsabukisa kwanza kwetigameko letifana naleti kulendzawo njengoba tingcolisa ligama labo bangumango kanti futhi nalokutsi letigilamkhuba solwa titfolakali kungulokunye lokulinyeva kubo.
Kunetehlakalo letivelile la lesingadati tichamba kunebantfu labatfolakala kulendzawo bafile sibe bathe siyabuka sithi cha lo monakalo lona asiwusiwo umonakalo lo sithokotisayo ngoba phela impilo yebantfu imcoka nasi umphakathi nje sibuka abantu bashona ngalendlela bashona ngayo kude lothokotana kungako besibona ukuthi sekungetulu kwemandla ethu kungcono sale sinxusa longetulu lonemandla kwendlula sonke.
Umfundisi Zakhele Hlophe weNew Paradise Jericho Church utsi indlala kanye nekufuna imali lesheshako kunemthelela kulomonakalo njengoba bantu bayengwa tinyanga ukuthi bangabulala umuntu bate unjinga.
Nathi sibantu bakamoya sibenako lokuthi ngoba leli lidimoni ke lifuna kukhanyelwa ngelive ligcinile sitokhalimela lona leli dimoni lihlasele lenkundla yalakithi ukuthi bonke lele benda leli dimoni lele benda udlwangudlwangu nale babulele labanye ingadi yabo ayikhulume lode kuye ngabantu ukuthi mhlawumbe nawubulela umuntu utawuthola kuceba thide uye ngebantu na ungadi ngekuhlupheka ugcina ungenile.
Sivele bekatsi simdzibi munye nemakholwa kulomthandazo naso sikhalile ngekwanza kwaletigameko kulendzawo.
Bantfu especially nabantwana abancane bayanyamalala emva kwenyamalala kwabo sengathi nje sekungumgomo ukuthi anganyamalala umuntu awutholakala shona. So sibantfu labasha labamcoka kakhulu ngenhlalakahle yebantfu nangekuphephisa abantu. Sikhandla nathi kumcoka ukuthi singaba part of umthandazo.
As a community kuba i-dumping site. If you remember very well ukuthi lakushona businessmen ebuhleni loku step by step kwabuye kudambelwa khona lanzinyana khona lapho lakudambele khona.
Kusukela ucalile lomnyaka balinganiselwa kulabanye abantu labatholakale babulewe emahlathini kulendzawo yasendzingeni kanti ke takhamuti tivetile ukuthi lo mthandazo seyinto lebatawuchubeka nekuyenta njalo njalo. Umbiko uThabiso Maphanga endzingeni.
Inhlangano Eswatini Anti-Venom Foundation sethulelwe esigcoko yahlonishwa ngumhlangano wetempilo i-World Health Assembly eveni leSwitzerland. Baba bonga-ke ngekunciphisa sibalo sebantfu labasishayako emhlabeni ngenxa yokulunywa tinyoka.
Inhlangano lehambisa lwati ngebungoti betinyoka iphindze isite labo labalunywa tinyoka kuleli i-Eswatini Anti-Venom Foundation imenywe ku-World Health Assembly eGeneva ukuthi ichaze ukuthi yenta ngani ukuthi kubete bantfu labanengi labashonako labalunywa tinyoka kanti yabaluma mihla le. Emalunga kalenhlangano waseGeneva kanzi ngemuva kwenkulumo yawo athulelwe isigcoko ashayelwa tandla ngemsebenti walenhlangano lewentako. Umsunguli walenhlangano Tia Lichkakon uthi kuyabathobisa kubona ukuthi umsebenzi wabo uyancomeka futhi uyabonakala.
We once it was 100% fatal. We haven't lost a single life, and even this year we've only lost one. And I mean by this year starting the 1st of September. So
Tia uthi bayatithaza teluleko tesive futhi ke banebudlelwano lobuhle nahulumende nesibhedlela se-Lock Commission ngetindzaba ukuthi umuthi we-antivenom ube khona kusitakale sive. Uchubeka uthi bayaluhambisa-ke nelwati ngato tinyoka bafundzise sive baceceshe nemavolontiya lekenta umsebenzi lomuhle emimangweni. Uthi-ke bayedama ukuthi lo muthi ube khona kusitakale labalunywe tinyoka. Lobika kungugiyane Msibingi Sembabane kanti letinye tithombe titholakale ku-internet.
Indvuna yetemidlalo umhlonishwa Bongani Nzima ithi umgubudla loqukethe tindlela tokuthi live lingatfola timendlela kuma-Olympics lotawatiwa ngele high performance strategy utawusita kukhicita abadlali labatawubuya netimendlela uma baye emidlalweni yema-Olympics emnyaka wa-2036. Indvuna beyikhuluma ngesikhathi iphakamisa lo mgubudla etinhlanganweni tetemidlalo kaManzini.
Jabula kakhulu namuhla kwekuthi sethule lo mgubudla lesiwubita nge-high performance kwekuthi sifuna ama-athletes ethu even a-achieve noma ke live achieve ema-medals noma i-first medal nga-2036 la khona kusho ukuthi ke sihlose kwekuthi vele sibe intent in terms of ukuthi sidevelope ema-athletes ethu. Sitawuba-ke ne-center la sitawubuka khona ukuthi bangatraineka kuphi bavele balungiselelwe le ndzawo yabo ivele be-high performance center. Labanye-ke sitawuphindze sente njalo sibanikete scholarship sekwekuthi bakwati kuphumela nangaphandle kwaleli kwekokuthi bakwati kuthola letinto bese tiyatholakala le kuma-Olympics noma ke lama-ground noma lama-centers lafanele baperforme kuwo vele sibheke ukuthi bawatayele kulo mgubudla nje lesiwufakile la vele sinenjongo lenhle kakhulu ukuthi by 2036 i-first medal kuma-Olympics siyayithola eSwatini. Ngicabanga ukuthi kulo mgubudla wethu muhle kakhulu ngoba unetigaba lakhona sitawucala kubuka nga-2028 kwekokuthi nga-2028 kambe sesihambe kanganani phindze sendlule nga-2030 ngoba siphokophelele ku-2036 ukuthi nga-2036 i-first medal Olympics siyayithatha. So vele isebentwe kahle kakhulu sibonge nje kuwo onke ematiko noma-ke kunetinhlangano ema-associations ethu labambisene kuze achamuke nalo mgubudla lo muhle kakhulu umfana wasekhaya siyasethembisa sive ukuthi ngalo 2036 noma nakanjani imedal siyawubuya nayo.
Iqembu leMalandi Chiefs selihlonyeliswe njengaboshampiyoni bendebe National First Division lesekusho ukuthi seliyawudlala ngaphansi kwePremier League kusizini letako. Leli qembu lishaye iLozitha Spurs ngalamane kulamathathu emidlalweni wekugcina wesizini eKilani eSipiki. Tingakwenza bathe Eswati sitawuvahlola emarket sitawubuya masinyane sichubeke nehlelo.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi.
Aba research bafunze.
Being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula.
Nathi kufuna senze ukukhicita lokusembili.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you'll go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Asimze sinemukele sakuvuselana losanza kusivulela sichubeka nalo luhlelo utakumele ukuthi ngalesihlanu evikini leliphelile indvuna yakalabor social security phila buthelezi yasukumisa ngokusemthethweni ilabor force survey yamnyaka wa 2023 survey lena lapho litiko libambisana nelihhovisi le-Central Statistical Office kubamba lolucwaningo lolaqala kusetshenziswa ngomnyaka wa 2007 lokonyalo sisemnyakeni wa 2023. The previous survey labanjwa ngeminyaka wa 2021 kanti kule survey yalo nyaka yavete ukuthi employment rate lapha even leSwatini ime ku 35.4%, which is an increase from the 2021 survey. Kepha ke kusilatiyela kabandi yona le survey imiphumela yalicwaningo sina statistician losuka khona etiko Melusi Isimelana sivusele mnguni siyabonga ube nathi lomhla ekseni. Officially it has been launched, the 2023 survey. Sifuna kuva ke the main objective yayo le survey ukuthi vele yini kahle kahle lena lenibuka konje naniphuma ningena kuma households nikatharisha data. What is the main objective yayo le survey? Ngoba kusivetela nje ne background nakhona ukuthi lona aqala ngonyaka 2007 dinombolo setikhule kanganani.
Thatha lithuba ngivusele babukele emakhaya. Ngivusele labathanza lihlelo. Si litiko la Labour and Social Security senda lolicwaningo lokubutha tinombolo letibuka abantu labasebenzako nalabo labangasebenzi. Umgomo ke noma leyo objective yaleyo survey ngilokuthi sibone ukuthi live libhekephi ekwakheni amathuba emsebenzi ukuthi bantu bakhona kusebenza. Yes.
Yeah, ngalokho sivele sathi ukuthi nanisenda lo msebenzi lona nisebenza ngaphansi kwama policies mhlambe la ngaphandle kwelive international policies kukhona nje ma lesawa adopter ama policies ama resolutions lesawa adopter ku 20th International Conference of Labour. Bekathini kahle kahle lawo ama resolutions lawo?
Cha uqinisile vele si ya report edinhlanganweni demhlaba lokufaka khathi International Labour Organization lokungiyo lehambisa embili leti tekusebenza. Kule ma resolution 20 ICLS resolutions sawa adopter sakhona kuwasebenzisa lawo ke bekabuke kakhulu letindzaba ukuthi lo msebenzi sesiwuhlukanisa kanjani ngoba uyukhanze ukuthi sibuka nje ukuthi umuntu nakavuka emsebenzini bese kuphelele kule nalele semuva. Yalo ke seka improved uyakhanga ukuthi siyabuka na ukuthi lama risks athini shothi economic risk sibuke nale ukuthi lo muntu usebenzele la ikakhulu kuzuza likhaya noma kuleyo business. Phinde sibuke na ukuthi lalabaqashiwe banganani kuleyo business ngebusiness lishothi ngale bukhulu bakhona ukuthi large scale small scale.
Okay, so ingabe vele mhlambe nasibuka nje yona le survey ya 2023 kuzivetela nje ama highlights. Si first nje kubuka the status on employment. Linganani linani labantu laba employed, linganani linani labantu laba unemployed lapha even.
Siyabonga nasi buka lolucwaningo la 2023 sitholile ukuthi kona akuhambi kahle in terms of unemployment rate shothi laba labangaqashwa litshengisa kukhula ngoba besiku 33.3 nga 2021 kodwa nyalo selikhulile la ku 35.4. Yes lokutshengisa kona ukuthi asiperform kahle silive. Lokhu kungaba kuhle lesikubonile kodwa nasikhuluma ngeyouth labo nabo 2015 to 24 kona sibone ngazuthi tinombolo tiyancipha kulaba labangaqashwa. Le rate ekhuleni nje sisuka ku 58% sesiku 56 kona nalo lelizinga alisilo lelitshengisa ukuthi lincipha kakhulu kodwa nje lo mehluko uyatshengisa ukuthi live libheke ephambili khona lokungcono leselikwenda.
Okay, ngifuna usihlukanisele nje kahle nje mngoni ukuthi vele kulabo labangasebenzi kunelihlobo luphi labangasebenzi mhlambe laseba give up labasola bafuna umsebenzi mhlambe laba decide nje ukutihlalele ekhaya ingabe nilende kanjani licwaningo?
Lolucwaningo luqale lihlukanise lokuthi wena sowuvele ukule minyaka yokusebenza yini vele yokushothi sibuta le minyaka kusuka ku 15 kuya kuyedolo. Then ke sesiyababuka laba qashiwe siyababuka labangaqashwa labo ngilabe sithi ke ngile labor force ngibo kakhulu lesibadadishako labe sebakhipha le miphumela bese kuba khona lokhanya ukuthi bangaphandle bona lesi bakhanze ukuthi lalabangaphandle nabo lizinga labo selinciphile lelinenginyalo sengilaba lokhanzi basemsebenzini noma bafuna lo emsebenzi ngoba sithi uactive nangabe usemkhankasweni ukuthi ufune lo msebenzi ikhulileke lelo zinga. Then kulabo laba lesithi ba outside si lapho ke ukhanya ukuthi sinalaba penshelwe sinalaba sesikolweni ngoba nasesena 15 ngakhanza ukuthi labanye basesesikoleni noma emacollege. And then ke bakhona ke nabo labo lokhanza ukuthi seba give upile. Kodwa nakhona inombolo sithi bona sitehla. Bantu seba active bayawufuna lemisebenzi. Kube ngilokuthi nje basesengakayitholi ngaleso sikhathi sifika kusonto lolucwaningo.
Okay, bese kuba khona nalabo mhlawumbe labane business abo.
Nasibuka lokusebenta vele si nalone business. Simfaka ukuthi ukulaba sebendayo. Yes.
Okay, nasikhuluma nje vele ngale data nini ikoleka kanjani le data? I think kubuka nje kulolu cwaningo la 2023 le population mhlawumbe nikhona kuyikhulumisa mhlawumbe indlu lenconnect ivakashela dibenganani this time.
Inombolo leti esikhonele ukuthi ivakashela dikhulile lonyaka ukuthi sikhulise lesembuli. Nasikhulisa ke lesembuli ngilapho sithole ama results lokhanza ukuthi atawuba mahle kuna phambilini. Ngalothi singene emakhaya siyaye sikhansi sihlukanisa le live ngema enumeration areas. Then la sifika la kulama enumeration areas shothi ngileyo boundary so yakhona ukuthi usebenzele lawo makhala lapho ekhathi. Then ke singenile kuma enumeration areas la 251 sathola emakhaya la 3011.
Okay.
Yes.
So kuyavela inkule survey ukuthi kukhona abantu mhlambe lesingathi they have multiple jobs or have more than one jobs, more than one income nabo labafaka sandla ekufuleni umnotho welive.
Tiyavela leto nombolo kule live report ngoba siyabuta ukuthi the main job wenda in lokho lokufaka inzuzo la khale leningi noma ke lawo chitha isikhathi lesiningi khona usebenta. Bese siphindze siyabuta ukuthi unawo ini lomunye umsebenzi lo wendawo ngaphandle kwaloyo. Bayasiniketa ke leyo mniningwane. Ile report iyakuveta nje lo.
Okay. So nasikhuluma nge-unemployment rate njengoba ushido nje ukuthi iku-35.4%. I-increase from le survey ya 2021. Ingabe nasibuka nje ama-females siphindze futhi sibuka nema-males nguphi la iphakeme ngakhona bobani lesingathi mhlambe ba-unemployed kakhulu lapha even.
Na sibuka ngebulili sikhanze ukuthi kucishe kufane ngeleti nombolo tonke tinyukile lokusho ukuthi kunyuka ngekufanana yona inyukile i-unemployment rate kodwa nje dikhona inhlelo letizamako lokuthi tilwe nalo ukuthi abantu bagcine bayithola imisebenzi.
Ile youth unemployment yona cause nayo siyakhumula ukuthi vele solo inkinga kakhulu abantu labasha solo abakhona ukuthola imisebenzi. Le report iveta kuthini yona?
I-report iyasitshengisa ukuthi sebazamile ukuyithola imisebenzi abantu labasha ngoba nasibuka nje ukuthi yona inciphile lokusithombele sihle nangabe inciphile ngoba kusho ukuthi sebaningi laba sebendayo. Siyabona lokuthi imisebenzi leminingi batholakala la kuma market services. Kusho ukuthi sebayakhona ukuvula leto amabhizinisi bathengise lokho labangakuthengisa. Nawo amanani market lokhansi ngiyabekisa unaso skill wafundzela kuyofundzisa. But sola ngothola lo msebenzi ukhanga ukuthi uyatendela eceleni ufundisa lawo bantwana khona ukuthola kuhle. Yes.
So nasikomparisha le ya 2021 nalena ya 2023 ngitiphi nje timvele singathi vele tishintshe kakhulu ngitiphi tinombolo singathi tishintshe kakhulu nasibuka le 2023?
Kushintsha kakhulu ngingasho lokuthi sesibona nyalo babanengi laba lokhanza ukuthi sebayaphithitela baya emisebenzini baya emabhizinisini bafuna lawo mabhizinisi noma applyela lawo maloni ukuthi bathole bakhona ukuvula lawo mabhizinisi. Leto nombolo totitshengisa ukuthi siselayini lelikahle litasibeka silive esithombeni lesingcono nasingaqhubeka kanje utokhanza ukuthi ecwaningeni lelandzela utokhanza silethi nombolo utokhanza setehlile noma setehleke ngelizinga leli tasijabulisa.
So nasibuka nje mhlambe labo labasebenta koniya le report yakubuka ukuthi kunalaba sebenta mhlawumbe nje things about occupational health and safety iyayibuka ne report lokuthi bangakhi mhlambe labasebenta imisebenzi leyingodi bangakhi labasebenta imisebenzi mhlambe lesingathi iphephile.
Imisebenzi vele sibuke yonke lekhona siyabuta lokuthi usebenta ngakuluphi uhlangothi basinikete lokuthi basebenta ngakuphi benda ini iyahlatiya le board ukuthi lemisebenzi ingakuphi nalabo lokhansi ke nasibukayo occupational health ukuthi baphephile yini noma ke labalimele emisebenzini tiyakhona lokuvela le dinombolo ukuthi time kanjani.
Niyakhona ikhoneleni ku mhlambe kuthola bamfrisi ngase bakhubatekile lapho semisebenzini le reports lena nansenda lecwana ukuthi bangaki bamfla bakhubatekile lapha semisebenzini imisebenzi lephila imisebenzi le kahle.
Kuliciniso sibatholile abantu labakhubatekile emisebenzini kodwa lo lucwaningo usikhanze ukuthi belusete lengcingwane lokhansi ibuta kakhulu ngalabo lekutawufuna sibukede ukuthi elicwaningeni lolandzelako mhlambe sithi sibanake nawo ukuthi basebenza ngakuphi. Yes.
Okay. Ngimaphi mhlambe ama challenges leni ihlangabetene nawo nje nisenda lo lucwaningo mhlambe lenifisa ukuthi sive sinibambise nansenda lelandzelako.
Alicwaningo lwahlale lo kugijinyo so siyacela nje ukuthi bamane basibambise tinombolo tibeti inhle kakhulu tebantu labasiphendulako nasifike emakhaya noma ngabe leyo msebenzi ukhansa isiyo le semthethweni siyakhona ukucoca nabo basinikete leyo mniningwane siyacela nje ukuthi bachubeke basiphendule ngoba siyayihambisa embili confidentiality ukuthi lo mniningwane lo angeke bese sesiyakhipha ukuthi lona wenda in kodwa nje sibuka le sector ukuthi okay mhlambe uka informal sector noma ke formal sector usho silawa business la bhalisiwe elihleni la hulumende le business. Yes.
Okay. I think lokunye lekuvetako le report yi child labor sifuna kungena ku child labor nje ukuthi vele nasikhuluma nge child labor sikhuluma ngani kahle nitfoleni nansenda lo licwana kukhona nivele mhlambe bamfanele singathi bayasebenziseka ngalo kungekho emthethweni.
Kulama resolution lesike sakhuluma ngawo a 2018 the 20th ICLS resolutions kushintshe le definition noma ngathi lama guidelines lekufuna siwasebenzise nasibutha i-child labor phambilini bobuka ukuthi baphi bantwana labaqashiwe labangephasi kweminyaka longu-17 siba khansi siyabathola bakuleyo misebenzi kodwa ke inyalo sewushintshile lo mthetho umthetho sowukhulumisa ukuthi child labor nabo uqashiwe noma ke uyasita kuleyo business yasekhaya bese ke sekuba khona lokhansi abakaqashwa but nasibasebenzisa siyabasebenzisa la kulama business bese sekuba nesikhathi ke lesikaliwe nasikaliwe ke lesikhathi umntwana nje lona 5 years kuya ku 11 years akameli ngelanga ece ku 2 hours solo asebenza kuleyo msebenzi bese kulona 12 kuya ku 17 akameli ece 5 hours per day solo asebenza leyo msebenzi daze teqa lapho sesithi ke naye so uyangena kulaba ku child labor inombolo vele tibe setiyashaya ngoba bukhansi labo asibafaki phambilini bese sibuka ukuthi child work kanti siyahlukaniseka ke le child work ne child labor ukuthi sekunemehluko i-child work ngesikhathi utawusebenza within lesikhathi lesibekiwe lo 2 hours na una 5 to 11 noma ke lo 5 hours na una 12 kuya ku 17 lapho ke usuke usenda le child work kweca lapho so setiyakhula ke lenombolo ngento lethi sishaye kakhulu ngoba sebabe sebayavela abantwana ukhansi bayasebenzisa ngalelo kanjalo khanga ukuthi sebayeqa kulama hours lesi labekiwe sebese ngeta ke lenombolo setiye ku 34% kanti bese 8.2%.
Yeah, okay. So nasibuka mhlambe emakhaya nalapha emadolobheni ingabe inombolo tivita ukuthi bangaki labaqashiwe lapha emadolobheni compared to emakhaya.
Nasicathanisa emakhaya nalamadolobheni kuyavela ukuthi lemakhaya kuseselikhona imisebenzi kakhulu ithola ngilaba labangala emadolobheni lemakhaya basasalele emva nje kakhulu noma ngide kahle inombolo kodwa nangibekisa ekhulwini 27.6 laba ku urban ukhanza ukuthi ba unemployed kanti nasibuka lemakhaya 72% ba unemployed.
Okay.
Lokusho ukuthi inenge lemakhaya lamadolobheni kuncinywa noma sibuka ngale tifunza ukhanza ukuthi manzini ulayisha abantu labanenge laba kule labor force.
Okay.
Banenge nalabantu phinze futhi nguyelo khansi uqashe abantu labanenge bese ishiselweni ukhansi labantu bancane phinze futhi nale unemployment rate yakhona isesedulu.
Okay.
Yes.
Kuma sesiya njengasamaphethelweni nasi lokho seyikhona nje le report tinombolo setivetile ukuthi employment rate ime kanjani. Le information lena lesenikolekile itawuseta kuphi kwakhiweni imigomo itabe sibheka phi lena data lenikolekile.
Le mniningwane lesibuthako unfortunately thina ukhanga ukuthi silandza lesithombe lengaphandle sisibuyise esiveni. Sengileto ngiloyo naloyo sekuthi abambele ichaza lakhe ukuthi indzaba temsebenzi sithi improve kanjani eveni. Unekhansi kunemigomo lebekiwe khansi kufuna sibuke ukuthi siphokophele kuphi nasibuka nje ama stage goals. Utakhansi leto tinombolo tiyasebenza kubona ukuthi live liya improve noma lenda njani kuleti temisebenzi. Yes, ukhansi ke ngakhona tinye ema international organization siyapota kucomparison nalamanye amave nawubuka nje esifundzeni sasendasi neAfrica kusadake. Sikufuna sitimikise khona nje letinye tinombolo babuka ukuthi live lime kanjani.
Okay. Kugcina iyatholakala yini for abantu labatafisa nje ukuyifunza ikhona yini ku website mhlambe yalodiko.
Lokho seyilonjiwe nje seyiyawonke umuntu lofuna kuyisebenzisa. Iyatholakala ku website ya government www.gov.sz bese uya page laka Ministry of Labour and Social Security ma publications lapho utawuyikhanza ibody yethu.
All right. Thank you so much Smakhulu Mbukeli nguyemelusi simelane ngu-statistician etiko laka Labour and Social Security asihlatela nje le report ye Labour Force Survey ukuthi icukethe ini kahle lapha ngekhatha lokukhulu kakhulu nje lokuvelako ukuthi employment rate meku 35.4% ngokusho kwelicwaningo lomnyaka wa 2023. Asibahlolete emakethe sithabe sitachubeka sibuke tangephandle kwakuleli.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.sz. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi.
Aba research bafunze.
Being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula.
Nathi kufuna sende ukukhicita lokusembili.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at international news. Israeli strikes across the Gaza Strip killed at least 103 people overnight and into Sunday, hospitals and medics in the battered enclave said. Israel is intensifying its war in the territory that, after more than 19 months, shows no signs of abating.
This weekend, Israel launched Operation Gideon Chariots to pressure Hamas into releasing its remaining hostages in Gaza. Gaza's civil defense agency said dozens have been killed, more than half of them children.
A suicide drone failed to explode, and as young people approached the barracks to retrieve things, they were targeted by a reconnaissance drone.
They're bombing houses and the people get scared. What should we do? This is the reality of the occupation. They treat us like animals, not as humans.
Meanwhile, on Saturday, a senior Hamas official and Israel's defense minister confirmed that indirect ceasefire and hostage negotiations between the two belligerents had resumed in Qatar. The defense minister said Hamas's return to the negotiation table marked a shift from its previous position of refusing talks. According to Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry, more than 3,000 Palestinians have been killed since Israel broke a ceasefire negotiated in January. Since March, an ongoing Israeli blockade of humanitarian aid is currently preventing water, fuel, and food from entering the Gaza Strip.
A Russian drone hit a bus evacuating civilians from a frontline area in Ukraine's northeastern Sumy region on Saturday, killing 9 people, hours after Moscow and Kyiv had held their first direct peace talks in years that failed to yield a ceasefire.
This shuttle was evacuating civilians, mainly elderly people, away from the front line when it was hit by a Russian drone. Their city is located some 10 kilometers away from Russia. It has become a frequent target since Ukrainian forces used the area to launch attacks on Kursk on the other side of the border. Ukrainians have no doubt that the attack on the shuttle was deliberate.
The bus was marked as a regular bus, and the route was written in large letters, so it's impossible to say that somebody made a mistake or that it was mistaken for something else. As a result of the hit, we have 9 dead.
Russia had no immediate explanation. It communicated instead on its military operations. Ukraine has been pushing for a ceasefire as a condition for peace talks. Russia, on the other hand, says there will be no ceasefire until a series of conditions are met. On Friday, Moscow and Kyiv held their first direct talks in years. As seen in this Russian tweet, which seems to be addressed to U.S. leaders rather than Ukrainians, the Russian delegation hailed some progress, starting with a deal on a prisoner swap.
It is necessary to do what the delegations were able to agree on yesterday. This, of course, first of all, is to carry out a prisoner exchange of 1,000 for 1,000.
The delegations discussed a meeting between Putin and Zelensky. For Ukraine, the Russian president needs to take part in talks in order to get any serious breakthrough.
1 person was killed after a bomb exploded outside a fertility clinic in California on Saturday in an attack labeled by the FBI as an act of terrorism.
Less than 2 hours, the length of time for the first face-to-face meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian delegations in 3 years. According to a Ukrainian official, Moscow demanded Ukraine to give up land in exchange for any potential truce, a condition that Kyiv, which is pressing for an unconditional ceasefire, deems unacceptable. The only concrete deal that came out of the discussion appeared to be a prisoner swap.
In the next few days, a massive exchange of prisoners, 1,000 for 1,000, will take place. Overall, we are satisfied with the result and ready to continue contacts.
Ukraine has called for direct talks with President Vladimir Putin, a request the Kremlin says it has noted. Hopes were not high heading into Friday's meeting in Istanbul, after Putin chose not to attend the talks.
This week we had a real chance to take important steps toward ending this war, if only Putin had not been afraid to come to Turkey.
During their meeting in Albania, European leaders denounced Russia's refusal to agree to Donald Trump's proposal for a 30-day ceasefire and threatened the Kremlin with new sanctions.
We called President Trump together to coordinate the response to the Russians' decision. We are also continuing to prepare new sanctions in coordination with the United States in the event that they fail to obtain a positive response.
Donald Trump, meanwhile, says he wants to meet Putin as soon as possible.
Severe storms that tore through the U.S. states of Missouri, Kentucky and Virginia left more than 25 people dead, leveling homes and businesses while knocking out power for tens of thousands, authorities say.
A deafening roar as whirlwinds sweep past panicked residents.
Hey man, it's a tornado, man. We're in a tornado. Oh!
One tornado after another tore through neighborhoods, destroying everything in its path, swallowing up roofs, flipping over cars, and even ripping entire floors off of buildings. Families were forced to flee their homes, finding refuge in their cars.
And then my husband and my son came running in, and we jumped on top of our daughter because we could feel everything get sucked in, and it sounded like tearing. Then we saw stuff fall, and most of the house was gone.
In the central U.S., the Meteorological Institute recorded over 20 tornadoes and around 30 violent storms in the space of a few hours. The city of St. Louis, Missouri, was one of the worst affected places. Rescue workers continue to search through the rubble for survivors. This local church partially collapsed before the pastor's very eyes.
It's horrific for a tornado to come through here and cause this much damage to the residents and also to the church. Our hearts are broken.
In Wisconsin, residents recorded a tornado ripping through a rural area. This cow was impaled by flying debris but survived, and this farm reduced to piles of wood and metal in a matter of seconds. Some 1,200 tornadoes hit the U.S. annually. The National Weather Service warns they could reach the southern plains and North Texas this weekend.
One person was killed after a bomb exploded outside a fertility clinic in California on Saturday in an attack labeled by the FBI as an act of terrorism.
On Saturday morning, a bomb exploded either in or near a car parked outside a fertility clinic in California, ripping a gaping hole in its wall and causing damage to multiple buildings in the area.
It's insane. You know, the world today, it's so scary that, again, I mean, just innocent people could be out here just doing their daily business and something like that happens. It's frightening.
Several people were injured in what the Federal Bureau of Investigation has labeled an intentional act of terrorism. Local media are reporting that the one person killed is a suspected perpetrator of the attack, and authorities have said they are not engaged in the manhunt. American Reproductive Centers, which operates the clinic in the wealthy California town, provides services including in vitro fertilization, genetic testing, and in-house egg donation.
This is a place of hope. This is a building that people go to start or expand their families. We acknowledge their pain and concern across the community.
Reproductive care remains controversial in the United States, where some conservatives believe such procedures should be outlawed. Those with strong beliefs that life begins at conception oppose in vitro fertilization because the procedure can produce multiple embryos, not all of which get used. While the Trump administration has taken action to restrict abortion access in the United States, it has also sought to widen access to fertility services, causing divides in the Republican base.
A man who attacked Salman Rushdie with a knife in front of a stunned audience in 2022, leaving the prize-winning author blind in one eye, was sentenced on Friday to 25 years in prison.
He stood quietly as the judge pronounced the sentence. Hadi Matar, the man who stabbed Sir Salman Rushdie at a New York cultural centre, has been sentenced for his attack on the novelist and for injuring another person who was on stage with him.
It is the judgment of the court in regard to the attempted murder in the second degree that he be sentenced to a 25-year determined state prison term in regard to the assault in the second degree. It is the judgment of the court that he be sentenced to a 7-year determined state prison term plus 3 years post-release supervision to run concurrent.
His lawyers had argued that prosecutors failed to prove the intent to kill needed for a conviction of attempted murder. Prior to the sentencing, Matar voiced criticism of the author.
Salman Rushdie wants to disrespect other people. Other people wants to be a bully, essentially, wants to bully other people.
Rushdie, meanwhile, refused to comment after the sentencing. The 2022 attack, in which he was stabbed multiple times, left him blind in one eye, with damage to his liver and a paralysed hand. Rushdie continues to have nightmares about the incident, according to the district attorney, who welcomed the sentencing.
He designed this attack so that he can inflict the most amount of damage, not just upon Mr. Rushdie, but upon this entire community, upon 1,400 people that were there to watch it. Consider for a moment the premeditation that took place here.
The incident unfolded more than 3 decades after the release of Sir Salman's controversial novel, The Satanic Verses. It prompted outrage among some Muslims who deemed it to be blasphemous. Sir Salman was driven into hiding for 9 years after Iran's religious leader issued a decree calling for his death due to the novel.
A Mexican Navy sailing ship on a global goodwill tour struck the Brooklyn Bridge in New York on Saturday, snapping its 3 masts, killing 2 crew members and leaving some sailors dangling from harness high in the air waiting for help.
New Yorkers were gathered by the river to watch the sunset Saturday when a Mexican Navy sailing ship festooned with a giant flag crashed into the landmark Brooklyn Bridge. As its masts were sheared off, the onlookers began to flee.
The boat kind of just was going past the bridge, and you just saw the top of it snap off, and it just kept on snapping, and I think there was a person dangling from the top.
Yeah. I couldn't tell if it was just blurry or just my eyes. And we were able to zoom in on our phone, and there was someone dangling from a harness from the top for at least 15 minutes before they were able to rescue them.
Yeah, and then we just stayed the entire time watching the whole rescue.
The National Guard came, I think.
The ship, called the Cuauhtémoc, had been on a goodwill tour, taking graduating military school cadets to 22 ports in 15 nations. Police say the ship had been supposed to depart to sea, but may have lost power, forcing it to head backwards for the bridge. Almost 300 people were on board, of which dozens were injured and at least 2 died. New York Mayor Eric Adams and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum have expressed their condolences. No one was injured on the bridge, which was spared major damage.
New Jersey commuter rail engineers walked off the job on Friday after marathon contract talks deadlocked, idling a train system that serves some 350,000 passengers a day.
It is New Jersey's first statewide transit strike in decades. NJ Transit, the 3rd largest transit system in the United States, is used by 350,000 commuters each day. Members of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, also known as BLET, picketed for their one demand: more pay.
They've got money to spend on everything else except for our pay. They spent $500 million on a new office building. They spent $53 million on furnishings for that office building. They continue to pay $40,000 a month for parking, but they can't give our locomotive engineers a pay raise.
The strike is especially difficult for around 70,000 New York-bound passengers. One of them had no idea that the empty train station meant the train wasn't coming.
I'm just waiting for the train to go to work,
The engineers that run the trains are all on strike. There's no trains today.
Oh, there's no train station? Oh, I did not know that.
The union is seeking new contracts for around 450 engineers with hourly wages matching those of the neighboring Long Island Railroad.
Our doors are open. We are ready to restart negotiations literally this second. But we need the BLET to come back to the negotiating table in good faith.
I just had a chance to meet with...
Contract negotiations are due to resume on Sunday. NJ Transit's CEO says an agreement is close.
They want to get back to work. This is not about not giving them a fair wage. It's about how do you do it in a fiscally responsible manner that doesn't bankrupt New Jersey Transit and puts it on a debt spiral.
The last statewide transit strike was in 1983. Back then, it lasted 34 days.
During his Gulf tour, President Donald Trump focused on advancing economic and strategic partnerships in the region. In his final stop in the UAE, he announced a deal allowing the country to purchase advanced AI semiconductors from U.S. companies, supporting Abu Dhabi's ambition to become a global AI hub.
Historic business deals and comments on how the U.S. is trying to resolve crises and wars. In his Gulf tour, Donald Trump and his delegation signed one deal after the other. Gulf countries diversifying their economies from fossil fuel to technology, industrial production, and also buying planes and weapons have put on the table billions of dollars and even more than $1 trillion at Trump's last stop in the UAE.
This partnership has taken a qualitative and unprecedented boost. And the attestament to this is the UAE's plan to invest in the US $1.4 trillion over the next 10 years.
Between various announcements, journalists following Donald Trump asked him about progress made in talks the U.S. plays a crucial role in. Starting with the war in Ukraine, the president vowed to soon meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The world is a much safer place right now, and I think in 2 or 3 weeks we could have it be a much, much safer place.
Trump also promised the U.S. will bring aid into Gaza.
We got to get that taken care of. A lot of people are starving. There's a lot of bad things going on.
In previous days, Donald Trump lifted sanctions weighing on Syria, holding the first meeting between a U.S. and a Syrian leader in 25 years. Before leaving the region, he made a symbolic stop at the Abrahamic family house.
Well, it's just a message of unity when you look at what we've just seen. It's great unity, great faith.
The complex houses a mosque, a church, and the Emirates' first synagogue.
Pope Leo XIV formally began his reign on Sunday by reaching out to conservatives who felt orphaned under his predecessor, calling for unity, vowing to preserve the Catholic Church's heritage and not rule like an autocrat.
Arriving by Pope Mobile, the new pontiff greeted crowds in St. Peter's Square. Pope Leo wasted no time setting the tone for his papacy in his inaugural Mass, calling out global systems that harm the planet and the marginalized.
In this our time, we see too much discord, too many wounds caused by hatred, violence, prejudices, the fear of difference, and an economic paradigm that exploits the Earth's resources and marginalizes the poorest.
The Pope vowed to make the Church a force for peace in the world, and he called for unity, a word he used 7 times during his remarks. His predecessor left a divided church, with conservatives accusing Francis of sowing confusion with off-the-cuff remarks that sent mixed messages. Many in the crowd expressed their hopes that Pope Leo will be able to bridge divisions.
I would say all of the Americans are emotional about it. Having an American Pope is not something we ever thought would happen. It's really powerful for American Catholics who sometimes feel separated from the world church to be kind of brought in and, included in this community through Pope Leo.
I hope it's potentially a way to bring everybody together. There's obviously a lot of conflicts around the world, and I hope that the Pope can potentially be a healer and a connection to everybody.
The Pope did not shy away from global events, calling for an end to conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine. Among the congregation attending the Mass in Rome, world leaders, including Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. The Pope is scheduled to hold his first private audience with Zelensky to discuss the Ukraine war.
Romanians were voting on Sunday in a tense presidential runoff between a hard-right nationalist and a pro-Western centrist in a high-stakes election rerun that could determine the geopolitical direction of the European Union and NATO member country.
With electoral campaigning officially over, it's the final stretch for Romania's two presidential candidates. Pro-EU centrist and incumbent mayor of Bucharest, Nicolae Dan, held a video call with French President Macron ahead of Sunday's runoff, discussing a solid partnership in the future.
Europe's main concern is undoubtedly security. I am very pleased that there is this NATO command in Romania led by French soldiers. This is the first thing we must develop if I win the presidential elections.
At a press conference on the same day, far-right AUR party leader and nationalist George Simeon did not appear discouraged, speaking confidently of an approaching victory and warning EU countries, especially France, not to meddle with the electoral process.
Sunday, I will be the next president of Romania, and we respect your culture, your history, but we do not respect Emmanuel Macron, who is trying to meddle with our elections.
Throughout his campaign, Simeon opposed military aid to Ukraine and criticized the EU's leadership, aligning his stance with that of US President Donald Trump. Simeon had topped the first round with 40% of the votes, but latest polls show the two candidates now at a tie. The country has been knee-deep in political chaos since its first presidential election was annulled last November, following allegations of electoral violations and Russian interference. Corruption and anger towards the political institutions in Romania have given rise to a wave of support for nationalist figures, which has divided the society, as some fear that a Simeon presidency could undermine Romania's long-standing Western alliances.
Poles were voting on Sunday in a presidential election at a time of heightened security concerns stemming from the ongoing war in neighboring Ukraine and growing worry that the U.S. commitment to Europe's security could be weakening under President Donald Trump. The top two frontrunners are Warsaw Mayor Raphael, a liberal allied with Prime Minister Donald Tusk, and Karol, a conservative historian.
They're the two candidates who led opinion polls ahead of the first round of the Polish presidential election. Rafał Trzaskowski, the candidate from Prime Minister Donald Tusk's party, who's likely to back the government's liberal reforms. Karol Nawrocki, a conservative candidate in line with the outgoing president's approach of blocking government reform plans.
These are very important elections with two diametrically opposed visions of Poland.
In Poland, the Prime Minister and Parliament hold primary authority over domestic policy, but the President has significant power. He's the commander of the armed forces, has a role in security and foreign policy, and can veto legislation. The war in Ukraine is a key concern, Poland being Ukraine and Russia's neighbor. Many Poles are concerned by the prospect that the U.S. could weaken its backing of European security. Among other major issues at stake, women's rights. Abortion is banned in Poland, except in cases of rape or when a woman's life is at risk.
These elections are about women's and minority rights, children's and animal rights. These elections are about security in the European Union and in the world.
The results of other smaller candidates will be followed closely. This election is a test of strength for the far right and other forces. The runoff is set for June 1st if no candidate gets more than 50% of the ballots in the first round.
Hundreds of Libyan protesters called on Friday for the ouster of the internationally recognized Prime Minister, and his government said one security force member was killed when some protesters tried to storm his office.
Thousands of people poured into the streets of Tripoli on Friday,
calling for the government to resign.
The situation is unbearable. It is essential that we take to the streets. We need to speak out. We want independence. We want dignity. Enough wars, enough repression, enough humiliation.
This week, violent clashes between rival militias rocked the Libyan capital. The fighting erupted after tensions escalated between groups backing Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dibaba, militias that together control much of the city. Furious at the violence, demonstrators tore down a portrait of the Prime Minister.
We're here to demand the fall of this government and the creation of one that would bring national unity. We also call for the disbanding of armed groups.
The militias support Libya's government of national unity, a fragile administration recognized by the UN, but with little real control beyond the capital. The east and south remain under the grip of General Khalifa Haftar. Friday's protests ended in bloodshed as several men attempted to storm the government building. One police officer was killed. Following the unrest, several ministers have stepped down from their posts.
Mexico, Chile and Uruguay have halted poultry imports from Brazil after the country confirmed its first bird flu outbreak on a commercial farm.
It's a major blow for the poultry business. On Saturday, authorities here in southern Brazil set up mass graves for chickens to contain an avian flu outbreak.
Nothing like this has ever happened before. We are always on top of things to make sure we don't have any problems.
Brazil's Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock said a first case of the virus was reported on Thursday, prompting it to declare an animal health emergency.
Our main concern is mitigating the risk of transmission of the bird flu. It's important to note that there are no more chickens on the farm where the outbreak occurred. The property has already been depopulated and this infection has begun.
On Friday, Brazil's Ministry of Agriculture tried to reassure global trading partners, saying the country's veterinary service has been equipped to deal with this disease since the early 2000s. It also stated that consumers can rest assured that the disease is not transmitted through the consumption of poultry meat or eggs. But major export partners like China and the EU have already reacted, imposing a 60-day ban on Brazilian chicken imports. The new outbreak of the avian flu will have an important repercussion in global markets, as Brazil is the world's largest exporter of chickens.
Gabon's ousted former president Ali Bongo has flown to Angola with his wife and son, who had been freed almost 2 years after being detained following a coup.
Transferred from prison to house arrest last week, Gabon's former president Ali Bongo arrived in Angola early Friday, along with his wife and son, who had been provisionally freed awaiting the pair's trial for alleged embezzlement.
I would like to make it clear that this measure, this decision to grant provisional release, in no way interrupts the normal course of the proceedings, which will continue until a fair, transparent and timely trial is held.
The release of the family followed talks between the Angolan president and Gabon's new leader, General Brice Oligui Nguema. Oligui, a former junta leader, seized power in the oil-rich country in a coup in 2023 that ended the Bongo dynasty's 55-year rule.
I'm Ali Bongo Ondimba, President of Gabon, and I'm to send a message to all the friends that we have all over the world to tell them to make noise,
Bongo came to power in 2009, taking over from his father, Omar Bongo Ondimba. In 2016, he was narrowly re-elected for a second term, beating opposition challenger Jean Ping after a campaign marred by bloody clashes and allegations of fraud. During their years in power, the Bongo family had been accused of accumulating immense wealth for themselves at the expense of the country, allegations they deny. The UN says despite its oil wealth, a third of its population of 2.3 million lives below the poverty line.
The Deputy Prime Minister, Senator Tulidladla, has arrived in Brazil, where she will be representing His Majesty King Mswati III at the second Brazil-Africa Dialogue on Food Security, Fight Against Hunger and Rural Development. The DPM is in the company of the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Mandla Chauka, and government officials. They landed at the Brasilia airport on Sunday evening. The DPM was received by Nomfanelo Simelane from the Eswatini Embassy in Washington and the Brazil Head of Africa Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Antonio Augusto Martin Cesar. This meeting will start on Tuesday and end on Thursday. It will open an opportunity for Brazil and African leaders to share knowledge on issues of ending hunger and ensuring food sufficiency. We've come to the end of our international news. Thank you for staying with us. Let's go for an ad break. We'll return shortly.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.sz. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi
aba research bafunze.
Being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula.
Nathi kufuna senze ukukhicita lokusembili.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Welcome to Eswatini Lifestyle. This is your ultimate guide to the entertainment, to the lifestyle and the culture of Eswatini.
Eswatini Lifestyle. Eswatini Lifestyle.
Eswatini Lifestyle.
From 6:30 to 7 p.m.
On Eswatini TV, Sibuko Semaswana.
On Eswatini TV, Sibuko Semaswana. The beats are louder, the vibes are bigger, and the stars are shining brighter. This is The Beatdown, your ultimate music and entertainment fix. With me every Saturday from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. on Eswatini television, Sibuko Semaswati.
Welcome back. 36 minutes after 7. Thank you for staying with us. Let's look at this report now, where a number of people affected by armed conflict, including those reported missing in the context, has only continued to increase. Now, this was said by Khaled Kiari, Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Asia and the Pacific. He was briefing the Security Council, and he said that in 2024 alone, the International Committee of the Red Cross, known as the ICRC, registered 56,000 new cases of missing persons. And he says there is no comprehensive figure for those missing in conflict, but we know enough that the situation is dire.
I now give the floor to Mr. Khaled Kiari, please.
Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to brief the Security Council on this important issue. Since the adoption of the Security Council Resolution 2474 in 2019, the number of people affected by armed conflicts, including those reported missing in this context, has only continued to increase. In 2024 alone, the ICRC registered 56,000 new cases of missing persons. There is no comprehensive figure for those missing in conflict, but we know enough that the situation is dire. International humanitarian law, as it relates to missing persons, prohibits enforced disappearance and requires parties to conflict to take all feasible measures to account for those reported missing, while also enshrining the rights of families to get information about the fate of missing kin. This issue is a pressing one among many current situations across the world. The ongoing hostilities between Israel and Palestinian armed groups continue to generate grave concerns under Security Council Resolution 2474. We welcome the recent release of Edan Alexander, an American-Israeli national who had been held hostage in Gaza. This is a source of hope. I echo the Secretary General's words of profound relief that Mr. Alexander was able to return to his family and loved ones after this harrowing ordeal. However, many more remain missing. An estimated 58 Israeli hostages, 35 of them presumed dead, still remain unaccounted for in Gaza. Despite repeated calls by the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross, no credible information has been provided on the condition or whereabouts of the hostages. Access by impartial humanitarian actors has also been denied. Their families still seeking information about their fate and whereabouts. In addition, Israel continues to withhold the remains of deceased Palestinians, including individuals reportedly buried in unmarked or numbered graves, hindering families' access to information and closure. Serious concern also persists regarding thousands of Palestinians detained by Israeli authorities since October 2023, many of whom remain unaccounted for. In Ukraine, following Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, OHCHR reports that large numbers of Ukrainian civilians in areas under Russian occupation have faced detention, with some of them reportedly held incommunicado. According to OHCHR, some of these cases may amount to enforced disappearances. An unspecified number of Ukrainian civilians, including Ukrainian children, have also been reportedly transferred to the Russian Federation. We welcome the recent exchanges of prisoners of war and exchanges of mortal remains and encourage the sides to step up the frequency, scope, and scale of such exchanges and step up efforts to enable the safe return of Ukrainian children to their families. In Myanmar, instances of individuals believed to be missing or disappeared have arisen throughout the country since the 2021 military takeover. At least 2,000 people have reportedly died while in military custody. A key concern remains the lack of access to legal counsel and due process for some people detained arbitrarily, including members of the elected civilian government. Families of many of those that have gone missing in conflicts in years and decades past have yet to learn of the whereabouts of their loved ones. On the Korean Peninsula, we encourage all parties to build on previous efforts and continue the repatriation of remains from the Korean War to their respective countries. In Syria, the missing persons crisis has been a tragically defining feature of the conflict. Syrian families have made it clear that clarifying the fate of all the missing, regardless of who they are and why they disappeared, is essential to transitional justice and sustainable peace. Given the scale and complexity of the challenge, we need a collective effort. It has to be nationally led and internationally supported. The UN welcomes the commitment of the Syrian interim authorities and urges them to work closely with the independent institution on missing persons in the Arab Republic of Syria. Mr. President, disappearances of loved ones create long-term trauma on families and communities. Providing answers for the families of the missing can take decades. For example, the human cost of the 1991 Gulf War still lingers, with 315 Kuwaiti and third country nationals missing to this day. The work of the Committee on Missing Persons in Cyprus illustrates how the issue of missing persons remains important, not only for the families directly affected, but for the whole communities decades after the facts. This is clearly not unique to Cyprus. What is more unique is the continuous support of the authorities, which was reaffirmed publicly by both Cypriot leaders in April, and the existing good cooperation from both sides when it comes to the work of the committee built over time. These, together with the strong professional capacity of the bi-communal teams working in the field or in the laboratory, are the key ingredients for success. Success that also helps to build conducive conditions for the peaceful settlement of the Cyprus issue. Mr. President, when the issue of missing persons is left unaddressed, not only individuals, but entire societies are unable to move on. This can perpetuate distrust and resentment and become an obstacle to sustainable peace. Goodwill, perseverance, and strong international support are crucial elements in the search for missing persons. So is respect for international law. Resolution 2474 must be fully implemented with urgency. The United Nations remain committed to assist all concerned parties, including through the use of the Secretary General's good offices. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Chiari for his briefing.
The Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Tom Fletcher, asked the Security Council members to reflect for a moment on what action will tell future generations we each took to stop the 21st century atrocity to which we bear daily witness in Gaza. Fletcher, briefing the Council on the humanitarian situation in the Palestinian enclave, said Israel is deliberately, unashamedly imposing inhumane conditions on the civilians in the occupied Palestinian territory. For more than 10 weeks, nothing has entered Gaza, no food, medicine, water, or tents. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have again been forcibly displaced and confined into ever-shrinking spaces, as 70% of Gaza's territory is either within Israeli militarized zones or under displacement orders.
Mr. President, members of the Council, briefing you again on this subject is a grim undertaking. Before starting, I ask you to reflect for a moment on what action we will tell future generations we each took to stop the 21st century atrocity to which we bear daily witness in Gaza. It is a question we will hear, sometimes incredulous, sometimes furious, but always there for the rest of our lives. We will surely all claim to have been against it. Maybe we will say we issued a statement, or that we trusted that private pressure might work despite so much evidence to the contrary. Or pretend that we thought a more brutal military offensive had more chance of bringing the hostages home than the negotiations which brought so many hostages home. Maybe some will recall that in a transactional world, we had other priorities. Or maybe we will use those empty words, we did all we could. Mr. President, let me start with what we see and are mandated by this Council to report. Israel is deliberately and unashamedly imposing inhumane conditions on civilians in the occupied Palestinian territory. For more than 10 weeks, nothing has entered Gaza, no food, medicine, water, or tents. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have again been forcibly displaced and confined into ever-shrinking spaces, as 70% of Gaza's territory is either within Israeli militarized zones or under displacement orders. As my colleague from the FAO will explain, every single one of the 2.1 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip face the risk of famine. 1 in 5 face starvation. Despite the fact that you have funded the food that could save them. The few hospitals that have somehow survived bombardment are overwhelmed. The medics who have somehow survived drone and sniper attacks cannot keep up with the trauma and the spread of disease. Even today, the European Gaza hospital in Khan Yunis was bombed again, with even more civilian casualties reported. I can tell you from having visited what's left of Gaza's medical system that death on this scale has a sound and a smell that does not leave you. As one hospital worker described it, children scream as we peel burnt fabric from their skin. And yet we hear that we did all we could. Mr. President, our response as humanitarians is to make a single ask of the Council. Let us work. The UN and our partners are desperate to resume humanitarian aid at scale across Gaza in line with the fundamental principles of humanity, impartiality, independence, and neutrality. We have a plan. We have shown we can deliver with tens of thousands of trucks reaching civilians during the ceasefire. We have life-saving supplies ready now at the borders. We can save hundreds of thousands of survivors. We have rigorous mechanisms to ensure our aid gets to civilians and not to Hamas. But Israel denies us access, placing the objective of depopulating Gaza before the lives of civilians. It is bad enough that the blockade continues. How do you react when Israeli ministers boast of it? Or when attacks on humanitarian workers and violations of the UN's privileges and immunities continue, along with restrictions on international and non-governmental organizations? Mr. President, this Council has adopted resolutions that demand all parties to the conflict comply with international humanitarian law and protection of civilians, including humanitarian personnel. A reminder that Israel also has clear obligations under international humanitarian law. It must treat civilians humanely, with respect for their inherent human dignity, It must not forcibly transfer, deport, or displace the civilian population of an occupied territory. As the occupying power, it must agree to aid and facilitate it. So for anyone still pretending to be in any doubt, the Israeli-designed distribution modality is not the answer. It practically excludes many, including people with disabilities, women, children, the elderly, the wounded. It forces further displacement. It exposes thousands of people to harm. It sets an unacceptable precedent for aid delivery, not just in the OPT, but around the world. It restricts aid to only one part of Gaza, while leaving other dire needs unmet. It makes aid conditional on political and military aims. It makes starvation a bargaining chip. It is a cynical sideshow, a deliberate distraction, a fig leaf for further violence and displacement. If any of that still matters, have no part in it. Mr. President, for the record, we have tried. The UN has met 12 times, and again this morning, with the Israeli authorities to discuss this proposed modality. We wanted to find a way to make it possible. We repeatedly explained the minimum conditions for our involvement on the basis of long-settled fundamental principles. Aid based on independent assessments of who needs it, the globally tested and donor-demanded basic requirement, and the ability to deliver aid to all those in need, wherever they are. The Secretary General set out the relevant international law in his submissions to the International Court of Justice. And your resolutions have strongly condemned starvation of civilians as a method of warfare and the unlawful denial of humanitarian access. Resolution 2417 demands the Council's full attention to widespread conflict-induced food insecurity. Mr. President, it's not just Gaza. Appalling violence is also increasing in the West Bank, where the situation is the worst in decades. The use of heavy weaponry, military methods of war, excessive force, forcible displacement, demolitions, and movement restrictions. Ongoing illegal settlement expansion. Entire communities destroyed, refugee camps depopulated. Settlements expanding and settler violence continuing at alarming levels. Sometimes with the support of Israeli forces. Recently, settlers abducted a 13-year-old girl and her 3-year-old brother. They were found tied to a tree. Do we also say to them that we did all we could? Mr. President, there is, I fear, a broader context here. For the past 19 months, Palestinian journalists, civil society, and individuals have live-streamed their destruction to the world. Many have been targeted and killed for their testimony. And during this time, international aid workers have been the only international civilian presence in Gaza, watching and reporting the unfolding horror. We are your eyes and your ears. And be in no doubt that we feel the weight of that responsibility, to you, to the communities we serve, and to the world. And so we have briefed this Council in great detail on the extensive civilian harm that we witness daily. Death, injury, destruction, hunger, disease, torture, other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment, repeated displacement on a large scale. We have described the deliberate obstruction of aid operations and the systematic dismantling of Palestinian life and that which sustains it in Gaza. So you have that information. And now the ICJ is considering whether a genocide is taking place in Gaza. It will weigh the testimony that we have shared, but it will be too late. Recognizing the urgency, the ICJ has indicated clear provisional measures that must be implemented now, yet they have not. Previous reviews of the UN's conduct in cases of large-scale violations of international human rights and humanitarian law, reports on Myanmar 2019, Sri Lanka 2012, Srebrenica, Rwanda, both in 1999, pointed to our collective failure to speak to the scale of violations while they were committed. So for those killed and those whose voices are silenced, what more evidence do you need now? Will you act decisively to prevent genocide and to ensure respect for international humanitarian law? Or will you say instead that we did all we could? Mr. President, this degradation of international law is corrosive and infectious. It is undermining decades of progress on rules to protect civilians from inhumanity and the violent and lawless among us who act with impunity. Humanity, the law, and reason must prevail. This Council must prevail. Demand this ends. Stop arming it. Insist on accountability. To the Israeli authorities, stop killing and injuring civilians. Lift this brutal blockade. Let humanitarians save lives. To Hamas and other armed Palestinian groups, release all hostages immediately and unconditionally. Stop putting civilians at risk during military operations. And for those who will not survive what we fear is coming, in plain sight, it will be no consolation to know that future generations will hold us in this chamber to account. But they will. And if we have not seriously done all we could, then we should fear that judgment.
Those are two reports from Gaza, where the United Nations is urging immediate intermediation there on the ongoing situation. We'll go for a quick ad break. We'll be back shortly to wrap up the show.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
It's a minute before 8 o'clock. We've come to the end of our program today. Hope you had a lovely time with us. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a lovely day.
the day you take Christ into your life, you begin to walk in a blessing.
Emaswati Master ushiya simakazi sibukela abanye bonkulunkulu uNkulunkulu tawukhwesha kithi emaswati singamlahli uNkulunkulu
sitomdumisa sisho sithi uyigwele somali
mase ubutholile lobungcwele hlala ungilongcwele
ningesabi nimaswati this is our season nguye idolo nguye namuhla nguye nakusasa
libika ngempela liqambone emanga lisho kona kokutsengiso sikhathi ukuthi mina nawe sihlale phasi sidle lona live likaNkulunkulu ehlelweni lelithi siyakudumisa kanti lomhlanje ke ehlelweni sichubeka silapha lobamba isontweni lesive lapho khona emakhosi ethu bekende inkonzo lenkulu kakhulu umkhosi wakhe Good Friday lapho khona besithi ngempela safelwa nguye Jesu Kristu unceda uNkulunkulu disitshela kabanti ngawe emavi lawakhuluma khona esiphambanweni Dincewa diphelanga ke namhlanje sitawuchubeka nato ehlelweni lelithi siyakudumisa kanti ke impela sitawuhlabelelisana emakwaya lapho kavela khona lapha sikhonda ngawo umculo adumisa uNkulunkulu afakazela nje lokho ukuthi ngempela thina nawe safelwa sendiwa dindlalifa tasekhaya ezulu ngethemba sitawubusiseka usehleti nami ehlelweni lelithi siyakudumisa